The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in Chicago, turning the sidewalks into rivers and the alleys into forgotten places where shadows gathered like secrets. Elena Vasquez pressed her body against the damp brick wall behind the Italian restaurant on Halsted Street, her fingers wrapped around the torn edges of a cardboard box she used as shelter. Her hair, a massive tangle of dark knots that reached past her knees, clung to her face like a second skin, heavy with water and years of neglect. She had stopped counting the months. Maybe it had been 2 years since she lost everything, maybe 3. Time moved differently when you lived on the streets, when every day was about survival, when the only calendar that mattered was the one that told you how long until winter would try to take your life again. The back door of the restaurant opened, and a rectangle of golden light spilled onto the wet pavement. Elena shrank further into the shadows, her heart pounding. She knew the rules of this territory. The men who owned this place were not ordinary businessmen. She had seen the black cars, the expensive suits, the way people lowered their eyes when they walked past. This was Moretti territory, and everyone in Chicago knew what that meant. A young man stepped out carrying a trash bag. He was maybe 19, with nervous eyes and a white apron stained with tomato sauce. He froze when he saw her, his gaze traveling from her face to the impossible length of her matted hair, coiled around her like a creature with its own life. For a moment neither of them moved. Then Elena raised one trembling hand, not to beg. She never begged. But the hunger in her stomach had become a living thing, clawing at her insides, and pride was a luxury she could no longer afford. The young man glanced back at the door, fear flickering across his face. Then he did something unexpected. He set down the trash bag, disappeared inside, and returned 30 seconds later with a styrofoam container. He placed it on the ground 3 feet away from her, as if she were a wild animal that might bite. And then he was gone, the door slamming shut behind him. Elena waited. She always waited. Trust was another luxury, and she had learned its price too many times. When she finally opened the container, the smell of pasta and garlic hit her so hard that tears burned her eyes. Real food. Warm food. She ate with her fingers, not caring about dignity, not caring about anything except the miracle of a full stomach. She did not know that someone was watching her from the window on the 2nd floor. She did not know that this single moment of mercy would change everything. Dominic Moretti stood at the window of his private office, a glass of whiskey untouched in his hand. He was 42 years old, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes the color of a winter storm. He had built his empire on discipline, on control, on the understanding that power was not about violence but about the careful management of fear and loyalty. He had seen homeless people before. Chicago was full of them, ghosts that moved through the city like reminders of what happened when the system failed. He had never paid them much attention. They were not his problem, they were not his concern. But this woman with hair like something out of a dark fairy tale, hair that seemed to have grown wild and free while the rest of her diminished. There was something about the way she held herself, even in her desperation, something that made him pause. His phone buzzed, a message from his second-in-command asking about the meeting tomorrow with the suppliers from New York. Dominic ignored it. He could not stop watching the woman in the alley, the way she ate as if this might be her last meal, the way her shoulders curved inward as if she were trying to make herself disappear. He thought about his mother. She had died 15 years ago, but he still remembered her voice, still heard her lectures about compassion and humanity, and all the things that had no place in his world. She would have hated what he had become. She would have looked at that woman in the alley and demanded that he do something. Dominic finished his whiskey in one swallow. He was a man who made decisions quickly, who trusted his instincts even when they led him into dangerous territory. And right now, his instincts were telling him something that made no logical sense. He pressed the intercom. On his desk, Marco, his head of security, answered immediately. "Bring her inside," Dominic said. "The woman in the alley. Bring her to the back room. Make sure she is not harmed." There was a pause. Marco had been with him for 12 years, had seen him make 1,000 strange decisions, but this one clearly caught him off guard. "Sir," Marco said carefully, "she appears to be homeless. She may be unstable. She may be dangerous. Dominic almost smiled. He had faced men with guns, men with knives, men who would have traded their souls for a chance to take him down. A starving woman with impossible hair was not going to be the thing that killed him. "Bring her inside," he repeated, "and Marco, be gentle. She has been through enough." The rain continued to fall as two men in dark suits approached Elena's hiding spot. She saw them coming and felt the familiar surge of adrenaline, the fight-or-flight response that had kept her alive on the streets. But there was nowhere to run. The alley was a dead end, and these men moved with the confidence of predators who knew their prey was trapped. She pressed her back against the wall and waited. The taller one, a man with a shaved head and surprisingly kind eyes, stopped a few feet away. He held up his hands, showing her that they were empty. "Miss," he said, his voice low and calm, like someone approaching a frightened animal, "my employer would like to offer you shelter from the rain, a warm place to stay, food. You are not in any trouble. He simply wants to help." Elena stared at him. In 2 years on the streets, no one had ever offered to help without wanting something in return. The shelters were overcrowded and dangerous. The churches were full. The kind strangers who approached her at night always had dark intentions hidden behind their smiles. She shook her head, her matted hair swaying with the movement. "Whatever you want," she said, her voice rough from disuse. "I do not have it. Leave me alone." The man exchanged a glance with his companion. Then he did something that surprised her. He took off his jacket, an expensive-looking thing that probably cost more than everything she had ever owned combined, and he held it out to her. "My name is Marco," he said. "I work for Dominic Moretti. He saw you from the window and he asked me to bring you inside. I give you my word that no harm will come to you. If you want to leave at any time, you may leave. But please, the rain is getting worse, and you will become ill if you stay out here much longer." Elena looked at the jacket. It was warm and dry and smelled like expensive cologne. She looked at the man, searching his face for signs of deception, for the cruelty that lurked behind so many kind offers. She found nothing but patience. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Maybe it was the simple fact that she had reached the end of her strength and had nothing left to lose. But Elena reached out and took the jacket, wrapping it around her shoulders like armor. "1 hour," she said. "I will stay for 1 hour, and then I am leaving." Marco nodded, relief flickering across his face. "Of course, miss. 1 hour." He led her through the back door of the restaurant, past the kitchen where cooks pretended not to stare, up a narrow staircase that smelled like garlic and old wood. Elena kept her eyes forward, her heart pounding, her mind racing through every possible escape route. The room they brought her to was not what she expected. It was warm and comfortable, with leather couches and soft lighting, and a fireplace that crackled with real flames. A plate of food waited on a small table, along with a glass of water and a cup of coffee. Elena stood in the doorway, suddenly aware of how she must look. Her clothes were rags, held together by safety pins and desperation. Her hair was a monument to neglect, a tangled mass that had become so heavy she sometimes thought it might pull her to the ground. She smelled like the streets, like survival, like everything this room was not. "Please," Marco said, gesturing to the couch, "sit, eat. Mr. Moretti will join you shortly." He left, closing the door behind him, and Elena was alone. She did not sit. She did not eat. Instead, she moved to the window and looked out at the rain, at the city lights blurred by water, at the world that had forgotten she existed. She was still standing there when the door opened again, and Dominic Moretti walked into the room. He was taller than she expected. More. Handsome, too, with a face that seemed carved from stone and eyes that held secrets she could not begin to imagine. He moved with the easy confidence of a man who had never been refused anything in his life, who controlled everything around him through sheer force of will. But when he looked at her, something in his expression softened. Just for a moment. Just enough for her to notice. "You must be cold," he said. His voice was deep and smooth, like whiskey poured over gravel. "Please, sit by the fire. I promise I will not keep you long." Elena did not move. She had learned long ago that promises meant nothing. "What do you want?" she asked. Dominic studied her for a moment. Then he walked to the fireplace and stood with his back to the flames, his hands in his pockets. "I watched you eat," he said, "in the alley. I watched the way you held that container like it was precious, like it was the most valuable thing in the world. And I found myself wondering how someone ends up like this. How? Someone falls so far that a container of leftover pasta becomes a treasure." Elena felt something spark in her chest. Anger, maybe, or shame. Both. "You do not know anything about me," she said. "No," Dominic agreed. "I do not. But I would like to." He paused, tilting his head slightly. "Your hair. How long has it been since you cut it?" Elena's hand went unconsciously to the tangled mass at her shoulder. She did not know why she answered honestly. Maybe because he was the first person in years who had asked her a real question. 3 years, she said. Maybe longer. I stopped keeping track. 3 years. Dominic repeated the words slowly, as if testing their weight. That is a long time to carry something so heavy. Elena laughed, and the sound surprised her. It had been so long since she had laughed that she had forgotten what it felt like. I carry a lot of heavy things, she said. The hair is the least of them. Dominic nodded. He crossed the room to the small table and poured himself a glass of water. He did not drink it. Instead, he held it in his hands and looked at her with an intensity that made her want to look away. I am going to make you an offer, he said. You are free to refuse. You are free to walk out that door and never see me again. But I want you to listen first. Elena waited. I own several businesses in this city, Dominic continued. Some of them are legitimate, some of them are not. I am not going to pretend to be something I am not. I am a man who operates in the shadows, and I have done things that would make you run if you knew them. He paused. But I am also a man who believes in second chances, and when I looked at you tonight, I saw someone who deserves one. What are you offering? Elena asked. A transformation, Dominic said simply. I'm going to send you to the best salon in Chicago. I'm going to have them take care of your hair, whatever that means. Cut it, treat it, do whatever needs to be done. I'm going to buy you new clothes. I'm going to give you a place to stay, a real place with a real bed and a door that locks. And I'm going to offer you a job. Elena stared at him. This was not real. This could not be real. People like her did not get offers like this. People like her got forgotten, got ignored, got left to fade away in alleys while the world moved on without them. Why, she whispered. Because I can, Dominic said. Because it costs me nothing that I cannot spare, and because my mother taught me that. The measure of a man is not in how he treats his equals, but in how he treats those who have nothing to offer him in return. He set down his glass and walked toward the door. Then he paused, looking back at her over his shoulder. The choice is yours, he said. You can stay here tonight, warm and safe, and tomorrow morning my driver will take you to the salon. Or you can leave right now, and I will never bother you again. He opened the door. But Elena, consider this. When was the last time someone offered you a tomorrow? He left, and Elena was alone again. She stood by the fire for a long time, watching the flames dance, feeling the warmth seep into bones that had been cold for years. She thought about the streets, about the cardboard boxes, and the cruel winters and the endless parade of days that all looked the same. She thought about her hair, about the weight of it, about how it had become a symbol of everything she had lost and everything she had stopped caring about. And she thought about tomorrow. When Marco came to check on her an hour later, she was asleep on the couch, her impossible hair spread around her like a dark river, her face peaceful for the first time in years. She had made her choice. Check if you are already subscribed to this channel. Every week we bring you stories of transformation and redemption, stories that will make you believe in second chances. Subscribe now and become part of a community that believes in the power of hope. The morning came slowly, filtering through the heavy curtains like a cautious visitor. Elena woke to the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of rain still tapping against the windows. For a moment, she did not know where she was. The couch was too soft, the room was too warm, the silence was too complete. Then she remembered. She sat up slowly, her hair falling around her in heavy curtains, and found a tray waiting on the table beside her. Coffee, fresh fruit, pastries still warm from the oven. A small card that read, "Whenever you are ready, Marco will take you to the salon. Take your time. D." Elena stared at the card for a long moment. The handwriting was elegant, precise, the kind of writing that came from expensive schools and careful practice. She traced the letter D with her finger, wondering what kind of man offered salvation to strangers in alleys. She ate slowly, savoring every bite, still half convinced that this was a dream from which she would soon wake. The coffee was the best she had ever tasted. The pastries melted on her tongue like sweet clouds. Even the fruit seemed more vibrant, more real, as if she had been eating shadows for years and was only now discovering color. When she finished, she found a bathroom attached to the room. There was a shower with multiple heads, bottles of soap and shampoo that smelled like expensive flowers, towels so thick they felt like embraces. Eleanor stood under the hot water for 20 minutes, watching years of grime swirl down the drain, feeling layers of her old life wash away. Her hair was another matter. It was so tangled, so matted, that the water could not penetrate it. She tried to work her fingers through a small section and felt the knots resist, solid as stone. This was the accumulation of 1,000 sleepless nights, 1,000 rainstorms, 1,000 days when survival had taken priority over everything else. She dried off and wrapped herself in a bathrobe that hung on the back of the door. It was white and soft, and probably cost more than a month's rent in her old apartment, back when she had an apartment, back when she had a life. A knock at the door. Elena opened it to find a young woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, holding a stack of clothes. "Mr. Moretti thought you might want something clean to wear," the woman said. "I hope these fit. If they do not, we can find something else." The clothes were simple but beautiful, dark jeans that fit perfectly, a cream-colored sweater that was softer than anything Eleanor had ever owned, brown boots that looked sturdy enough for walking but elegant enough for anywhere. Eleanor dressed slowly, looking at herself in the mirror. She almost did not recognize the woman staring back at her. The clothes made her look almost normal, almost like someone who belonged in this world. Except for the hair. The hair was still a monument to everything she had been through, a wild tangle that no amount of clean clothes could hide. Marco was waiting for her in the hallway. He smiled when he saw her, genuine warmth in his eyes. "You look different," he said. "Better. Are you ready?" Eleanor touched her hair self-consciously. "I do not know if anyone can do anything with this," she said. "It might be beyond saving." Marco's smile widened. "You have not met Isabella yet," he said. "If anyone can work miracles, it is her." The drive across Chicago took them through neighborhoods Elena had never seen before. Lake Michigan appeared and disappeared between buildings, gray and restless under the cloudy sky. The car was warm and comfortable, with leather seats that seemed to embrace her and classical music playing softly through hidden speakers. Marco drove in silence, giving her space to think. Elena appreciated that. She had spent so long talking to herself that the presence of another person still felt strange, still required effort. They stopped in front of a salon in the Gold Coast neighborhood. The building was all glass and chrome, modern and expensive, the kind of place that Elena would have walked past 1,000 times without daring to enter. "This is it," Marco said. "Isabella is expecting you. Take as long as you need. I will wait here." Elena stepped out of the car and stood on the sidewalk, looking up at the building. People walked past her without a second glance, probably assuming she was another customer, another woman with money to spare and time to kill. If only they knew. She pushed open the glass door and entered a world of white marble and soft lighting, and the subtle scent of lavender. The reception area was staffed by a young man with perfect hair and a practiced smile. "You must be Elena," he said. "Isabella is waiting for you in the back. Follow me." The salon was larger than it appeared from outside. There were dozens of stations, each with mirrors surrounded by lights, each occupied by stylists working magic on their clients. Music played softly in the background, something peaceful and unobtrusive. The air smelled like expensive products and fresh coffee. Eleanor followed the receptionist past all of this to a private room at the very back of the salon. The door was closed. The receptionist knocked twice, then opened it and gestured for Eleanor to enter. The room was different from the rest of the salon, warmer, more personal. There were plants in the corners and photographs on the walls, and a single chair in the center, facing a large mirror. And there was Isabella. She was perhaps 60 years old, with silver hair cut short, and stylish, with hands that looked strong and capable, with eyes that seemed to see everything and judge nothing. She wore simple black clothes and no jewelry except for a thin gold chain around her neck. "So," Isabella said, her voice carrying a faint Italian accent. "You are the one Dominic called me about." Elena nodded, suddenly unable to speak. Isabella walked around her slowly, studying her from every angle. Her eyes lingered on Elena's hair, on the massive tangle that hung almost to the floor. "May I touch it?" Isabella asked. Elena nodded again. Isabella's hands were gentle as they explored the damage. She lifted sections, tested knots, traced the path of tangles that had been building for years. Her face revealed nothing as she worked, but Elena could feel her attention, her focus, her complete dedication to understanding the problem before her. Finally, Isabella stepped back. "Tell me," she said, "how long has it been since someone took care of you?" Elena felt tears prick her eyes. The question was so simple, so direct and so devastating. "I do not remember," she whispered. Isabella nodded as if this was the answer she expected. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the chair. "We have a lot of work to do." Eleanor sat. The chair was comfortable, almost like a throne. She faced the mirror and saw herself, saw the woman she had become, saw the hair that had grown wild while the rest of her diminished. "I should warn you," she said. "It might be impossible. You might have to cut it all off." Isabella smiled, and for the first time warmth entered her eyes. "Nothing is impossible," she said. "Some things just take more patience than others." She began to work. The process took hours. Isabella started at the bottom, working with oils and conditioners and tools that Eleanor had never seen before. She did not rush. She did not force. She coaxed each tangle apart with patience that seemed almost inhuman, treating Eleanor's hair not as a problem to be solved, but as a puzzle to be unraveled. Other stylists came to watch. They stood in the doorway, their eyes wide, whispering to each other. Elena heard fragments of their conversations. Unbelievable. How did it get like this? Look at what Isabella is doing. But Isabella paid them no attention. She was lost in her work, humming softly as her hands moved through Eleanor's hair, finding paths through chaos, creating order where there had been none. Sometime in the afternoon, a young woman brought lunch, sandwiches and salads and sparkling water, with lemon. Isabella insisted that Elena eat, taking a break herself to stretch her hands and rest her eyes. "You are doing well," Isabella said. "Most people would have given up by now." Elena looked at her reflection in the mirror. There was still so much hair tangled around her, still so much work to be done. But she could see progress. She could see strands beginning to separate, beginning to remember what it was like to be individual instead of part of a mass. "Why are you doing this?" Elena asked. "You do not even know me." Isabella smiled that warm smile again. "Dominic called me yesterday," she said. "He told me about you. He said you were someone who deserved a chance. He said he looked at you and saw his mother." Eleanor blinked. His mother. Isabella nodded. "She was a client of mine, many years ago. Before she passed. She used to come here every month, sit in this very chair and tell me stories about her son, about how he was hard on the outside but soft on the inside, about how she worried that the world would make him forget his heart." She returned to work, her hands moving through Eleanor's hair with renewed purpose. "When Dominic calls me and asks for a favor, I always say yes. Because I remember Maria. I remember how much she loved her son. And I like to think that when he does something kind, she is watching from somewhere." Smiling. Elena sat in silence, absorbing this information. The man who had offered her a second chance was not just a businessman operating in shadows. He was a son who still carried his mother's voice inside him, still tried to live up to her expectations, even though she was gone. The afternoon turned into evening. The other stylists went home one by one, calling goodnight, leaving Isabella and Elena alone in the salon. The lights outside the windows changed from grey to golden to dark, marking the passage of time that Elena had stopped tracking. And still, Isabella worked. Finally, as the clock approached 9, Isabella stepped back and set down her tools. "There," she said, "it is done." Elena opened her eyes. She had not realized she had closed them. The woman in the mirror was a stranger. Her hair fell past her shoulders in smooth, dark waves. It was still long, still substantial, but it was alive now. It moved when she moved. It caught the light and reflected it back in shimmers of brown and black and hidden red. It was the hair of someone who mattered, someone who was seen, someone who existed in the world instead of hiding from it. Elena raised her hand and touched it. The strands slipped through her fingers like silk. "I saved as much as I could," Isabella said. "Some of it was too damaged, but most of it just needed patience and care." She smiled. "Like you." Elena tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, tears rolled down her cheeks, and she did not try to stop them. Isabella handed her a tissue and stood behind her, their eyes meeting in the mirror. "You are beautiful," Isabella said. "You were always beautiful. The world just forgot to notice. But now they will see." Elena wiped her eyes and took a deep breath. "Thank you," she said. "I do not know how to thank you. You do not need to thank me." Isabella's hand rested briefly on Elena's shoulder. "Just live. That is enough." Marco was still waiting outside when Elena emerged from the salon. He had moved the car closer to the door, and he was leaning against it, scrolling through his phone. When he looked up and saw her, his face went through a series of expressions that Elena would remember for the rest of her life. Surprise, recognition, wonder. "Miss Elena," he said, straightening up. "You look—" He trailed off, shaking his head. "You look incredible." Elena laughed, and this time the sound did not surprise her. It felt natural, it felt right. "Thank you," she said, "for everything today." Marco opened the car door for her, and she slid into the back seat. The leather felt the same, the music sounded the same, but everything was different. Now, Elena was different. "Where are we going?" she asked. "Mr. Moretti would like to see you," Marco said. "If you are willing." He said to tell you that there is no obligation. You can go straight to the apartment he has arranged for you, or you can join him for dinner. The choice is yours. Elena looked at her reflection in the car window. The woman staring back at her had choices now, had options, had a tomorrow that looked different from all the yesterdays. "Take me to him," she said. Marco smiled. Anne started the car. The restaurant was different at night, softer, more intimate. The tables were lit with candles, and the windows looked out onto a street that glistened with recent rain. Music played somewhere in the background, something with violins and longing. Dominic was waiting at a corner table, a glass of red wine in front of him. He wore a dark suit and an open-collared shirt, and he looked like someone from a movie, someone who existed in a world of beauty and danger and impossible choices. When Elena approached, he stood. The movement was automatic, ingrained, the kind of manners that came from generations of expectation. But his eyes betrayed something else entirely. "Elena," he said, and her name on his lips sounded like a discovery. "You look—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Reborn." Elena smiled and took the seat he offered. "I feel reborn," she said. "Isabella is a miracle worker." "She is," Dominic agreed, sitting back down. "She has been taking care of women in this city for 40 years. My mother used to say that Isabella did not just do hair, she did hope." Eleanor picked up the menu, more to have something to do with her hands than because she was ready to order. "Your mother sounds like she was a special woman." She was. Dominic's voice softened. She died 15 years ago, but I still hear her voice sometimes, telling me to be better, telling me that power means nothing without compassion. A waiter appeared, took their orders, and disappeared again. The restaurant was quiet, with only a few other tables occupied. Privacy, Elena realized, was something that men like Dominic could buy. "Tell me about yourself," Dominic said. Before the streets." Elena considered the question. It had been so long since anyone had asked about her past that the memories felt like artifacts from another life, dusty and fragile. "I was a nurse," she said finally. "I worked at Northwestern Memorial for 8 years. I was good at it. I loved it." "What happened?" Elena looked at the candle flame dancing between them. "My husband happened," she said. "We were married for 5 years. At first it was good. He was charming, attentive. Everyone said I was lucky." She paused, and then, slowly, everything changed. He started controlling what I wore, who I saw, what I said. And then, the control turned into something worse. Dominic's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "I tried to leave," Elena continued, 3 times. "But he always found me. He had connections, friends in places that mattered. The 3rd time he took everything, my job, my apartment, my bank accounts. He made me disappear from my own life. And you ended up on the streets." Elena nodded. "I was too ashamed to ask for help, too proud, too scared. I thought that if I just kept moving, if I just stayed invisible, maybe he would eventually forget about me." She laughed bitterly. "Instead, I forgot about myself." Dominic was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across the table and took her hand. His palm was warm and rough, the hand of a man who had done hard things. "You are not invisible anymore," he said. "And if your husband is still looking for you, he will have to go through me." Elena felt something shift inside her chest. A wall she had built years ago, brick by brick, began to show cracks. "Why?" she asked. "Why are you doing all of this? You do not owe me anything." Dominic did not answer immediately. He released her hand and sat back, his eyes distant. 20 years. "Ergo," he said finally, "I made a choice. I chose power over everything else. I built an empire, but I built it on things that my mother would have hated. She died thinking I would become something better. And every day since, I have carried that failure with me." He looked at her, and for the first time Elena saw vulnerability in his eyes. "When I saw you in that alley," he said, "I saw someone who had fallen, and I thought, maybe this is my chance. Maybe if I help one person rise again, it will mean something. Maybe my mother will forgive me." Elena did not know what to say. The man sitting across from her was not the monster she had expected. He was something more complicated, something more human. The food arrived, and they ate in companionable silence. The meal was exquisite, each dish a work of art. But Elena barely tasted it. She was too aware of the man across from her, too aware of the strange path that had brought them together. After dinner, Dominic walked her to the car. The rain had stopped, and the city glittered under a sky that was beginning to clear. "Marco will take you to your new apartment," Dominic said. "Everything you need is there. Clothes, food, whatever you want. And tomorrow, if you are willing, I would like to show you the job I have in mind." Elena looked at him. "What kind of job?" Dominic smiled, and the expression transformed his face from intimidating to almost boyish. "I own a clinic," he said. "A free clinic on the south side. It serves people who have nowhere else to go, people like you were. It needs nurses, good nurses. I thought maybe you might want to remember what you were good at." Elena felt her heart squeeze. "You are offering me my life back," she said. "I am offering you a chance to build a new one," Dominic corrected. "What you do with it is up to you." He opened the car door for her, and she paused, one hand on the frame. "Dominic," she said. He looked at her. "Thank you." He nodded once, something unreadable passing through his eyes. Then, he stepped back, and Marco started the car, and Elena watched him grow smaller in the rearview mirror until he disappeared entirely. If you are watching this right now, and something in Elena's story is touching your heart, leave a comment saying, "Everyone deserves a second chance." Let me know you believe in redemption. Let me know you believe that transformation is possible for anyone, no matter how far they have fallen. 3 weeks passed, like a dream that Elena was afraid to wake from. The apartment Dominic had arranged for her was small but beautiful, with large windows that looked out over the Chicago skyline and a kitchen stocked with more food than she could eat in a month. She spent the first few days just touching things: the soft blankets on the bed, the thick towels in the bathroom, the coffee maker that worked every time she pressed the button. She started working at the clinic on her 4th day. It was everything Dominic had described and more. A small building on the south side painted bright blue, filled with people who had nowhere else to go. Mothers with sick children, elderly men with chronic conditions, teenagers who had never seen a doctor in their lives. Eleanor remembered how to be a nurse. It came back to her like muscle memory, like riding a bicycle, like breathing. She took vitals and dressed wounds and held hands and listened. So much listening. These people had been ignored for so long that sometimes they just needed someone to hear them. The other staff welcomed her without questions. They were used to people arriving with complicated pasts. They judged each other by what they did, not by where they came from. Dominic visited the clinic once a week. He came not as an owner, but as a volunteer, helping wherever he was needed. Elena watched him carry boxes and mop floors and play games with the children waiting for their appointments. He was different here than he was in his other world, softer, more present. She found herself looking forward to his visits, found herself thinking about him when he was not there. One evening after the clinic had closed, Eleanor was finishing paperwork when Dominic appeared in the doorway of her small office. "Working late," he said. Elena looked up and smiled. "There is always more to do." Dominic nodded and leaned against the doorframe. "You have been here 3 weeks," he said. "How does it feel?" Elena set down her pen and considered the question. "It feels like coming home," she said, "except better. Because this home is one I chose." Dominic smiled, and Elena felt that wall inside her crack a little more. "I want to show you something," he said. "Will you come with me?" Elena hesitated. "Where?" "Somewhere that matters to me." He held out his hand. "Trust me." She looked at his hand. Strong, capable. The hand of a man who had done hard things, but was trying to do better. She took it. He drove them himself this time, in a sleek black car that purred like a contented animal. The city passed by, the windows in ribbons of light, and Elena watched it without really seeing it. She was too aware of his presence beside her, too aware of the warmth radiating from his body. They stopped at a cemetery on the outskirts of the city. The rain had returned, soft and gentle, and Dominic held an umbrella over them both as they walked between rows of headstones. They stopped at a grave marked with a simple stone. Maria Moretti, beloved mother, 1945, 2009. Dominic stood in silence for a long moment, looking down at the stone. Then he spoke. "I come here when I need to remember who I am supposed to be," he said, "when the darkness gets too heavy, when I forget why I started trying to be better." Elena said nothing. She understood the weight of grief, the way it settled into your bones and never quite left. "I wanted you to meet her," Dominic continued, "in a way." He looked at Eleanor. "I wanted her to meet you." "Why?" "Because you are the first person in a long time who has made me feel like I might be worthy of her memory." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "Dominic," she said softly. He turned to her and the look in his eyes was raw, unguarded. Everything he usually kept hidden was right there on the surface. "I know I am not a good man," he said. "I know the things I have done. But when I am with you, I feel like maybe I could become one." Eleanor reached up and touched his face. Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, rough with stubble. "You are already trying," she said. "That is more than most people do." He closed his eyes at her touch, and she saw the tension in his shoulders begin to release. They stood there in the rain, beside his mother's grave, and something passed between them that neither of them could name. It was not love. Not yet. It was something before love. Something that might grow into love if given enough time and care. Eleanor took his hand again, and they walked back to the car together. The next morning, Eleanor woke to a knock on her apartment door. She opened it, to find Marco standing in the hallway, his face serious. "Miss Eleanor," he said, "Mr. Moretti sent me. We have a problem." Eleanor felt her stomach drop. What kind of problem? Marco hesitated. "It is about your husband," he said. "He has found you." The world tilted. Eleanor grabbed the doorframe to steady herself. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. "How?" she whispered. Marco shook his head. "We are not sure, but he arrived in Chicago yesterday. He has been asking questions." Showing. "Your photograph around." Elena's legs threatened to give out. 3 years. 3 years of running, of hiding, of building walls around herself, and he had still found her. "Mr. Moretti wants to see you," Marco said. "He has a plan, but you need to come now." Elena dressed in a daze, her hands shaking as she pulled on clothes. The fear was back, crawling up her spine like a living thing. She had thought she was free. She had thought she was safe. She should have known better. The drive to Dominic's office felt endless. Elena sat in the back seat of the car, watching the city pass by, feeling her new life crumble around her. When they arrived, Dominic was waiting for her. He took one look at her face and crossed the room in 3 long strides, pulling her into his arms. "I have got you," he said. "He will not touch you. I swear it on my mother's grave." Elena buried her face in his chest, breathing in his scent, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I should leave," she said. "I should disappear again. I should not have let myself believe this could last." Dominic pulled back and took her face in his hands. "Look at me," he said. She looked. "You are not running anymore," he said. "Running does not work. It never works. The only way to be free is to face the thing that haunts you. And when you face it, I will be right beside you." Eleanor felt something inside her shift. She had spent so long being afraid, so long letting fear control every decision. And here was this man, this complicated, dangerous, tender man, offering to stand with her. "What is your plan?" she asked. Dominic released her and walked to his desk. He picked up a folder and handed it to her. "Your husband," he said. "His name is Richard Caldwell. He works for a lobbying firm in Washington. He has connections to 3 senators and several powerful businessmen. He believes he is untouchable." Eleanor opened the folder. There were photographs, documents, financial records, evidence of crimes she had never known about. "How did you get this?" she asked. "I have resources," Dominic said. "I have been gathering information since you told me about him, and I discovered something interesting." "What?" Dominic smiled, but it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a predator who had cornered his prey. "Your husband has enemies," he said. "Powerful enemies. People he has wronged. People who would love nothing more than to see him brought down. All they need is someone willing to light the match." Elena looked at the documents in her hands. 3 years of running, 3 years of fear, and here in this folder was everything she needed to end it. "What do I have to do?" she asked. "Nothing," Dominic said. "You do not have to do anything. I will handle this. All you have to do is trust me." Elena looked at him, at this man who had pulled her from an alley and given her hope, at this man who had introduced her to his mother's grave and confessed his dreams of redemption. "I trust you," she said. Dominic nodded. "Then it begins." The confrontation happened 3 days later. Eleanor was working at the clinic when she saw him through the window, Richard, her husband, standing across the street, watching the building with that same cold calculation she remembered from their marriage. He looked older, grayer, but the cruelty in his eyes was exactly the same. She did not run. She did not hide. Instead, she walked to the window and stood there, letting him see her. Their eyes met across the distance, and Elena felt something she had never expected to feel. Nothing. No fear, no panic, no desperate urge to flee, just the calm certainty that she was done letting this man control her life. Richard crossed the street and entered the clinic. The patients in the waiting room looked up at him with wary eyes. He ignored them, his attention fixed on Eleanor. "There you are," he said. His voice was the same too, smooth and poisonous. "Do you know how much trouble you have caused me?" Eleanor did not answer. She simply turned and walked toward the back of the clinic, knowing he would follow. The confrontation room, as Dominic had called it, was a small office at the end of the hallway. Eleanor entered and took a seat behind the desk. Richard followed, closing the door behind him. "You look different," he said, studying her. "Someone has been taking care of you." "I have been taking care of myself," Eleanor said, "for the first time in years." Richard laughed, that same cold, dismissive laugh she remembered. "You are nothing without me," he said. "You never were. You will come back now. You will come back, and you will remember your place, and we will never speak of this again." "No," Elena said. The word hung in the air between them. Richard's face changed. The mask of charm slipped, and she saw the monster underneath. "You do not tell me no," he said. "No one tells me no. I just did." He moved toward her, and Elena did not flinch. She did not have to. The door opened, and Dominic walked in. He was not alone. Behind him were Marco and 4 other men, all of them wearing the serious expressions of people who meant business, and behind them, to Elena's surprise, were 2 women she did not recognize. One wore a business suit, the other carried a camera. Richard stopped. He looked at Dominic, then at the men, then at the women. Confusion crossed his face. "Who are you?" he demanded. Dominic smiled. "My name is Dominic Moretti," he said, "and you are in my city." Richard's confusion turned to recognition, then to something that looked almost like fear. "Moretti," he repeated, "I have heard of you. Then you know that crossing me is a mistake." Richard straightened, trying to recover his composure. "This is between me and my wife," he said. "It has nothing to do with you." Dominic walked slowly across the room until he was standing directly in front of Richard. He was taller, broader, more physically imposing in every way, but that was not what made Richard step back. It was the look in Dominic's eyes. The absolute certainty of a man who had decided exactly how this would end. "Elena is under my protection," Dominic said. "She has been since the night I found her in an alley, starving and broken because of you. And I do not take kindly to people who hurt those I protect." Richard looked at Elena. "You are sleeping with him," he said. "Of course. I should have known you would find another man to manipulate." Elena stood. Her voice, when she spoke, was steady and strong. "I never manipulated anyone," she said. "I survived you, and I am done surviving. I am done running. I am done being afraid." She walked around the desk and stood beside Dominic. "These women are journalists," she continued. "They have been investigating you for months. And this folder," she held up the documents Dominic had given her, "contains evidence of every crime you have committed. Financial fraud, tax evasion, bribery, and the names of every person you have hurt along the way." Richard's face went pale. "You cannot do this," he said. "I have friends. I have connections. I will destroy you." The woman with the camera spoke for the first time. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "we have already contacted your connections. They are very interested in distancing themselves from you. Something about self-preservation." Richard looked around the room, seeing for the first time that there was no escape, no angle, no manipulation that could save him. "What do you want?" he asked. His voice had lost its smoothness. Now it was just desperate. "I want you to sign these documents," Elena said. She pulled a stack of papers from the folder. "Divorce papers, restraining order, full confession of the crimes detailed here. You will sign them all, and then you will leave Chicago and never contact me again. And if I refuse..." Dominic stepped forward. "Then I will handle this my way," he said. "And believe me, Mr. Caldwell, you do not want to see my way." The silence stretched. Richard looked at the papers, at Eleanor, at Dominic, at the journalists who were documenting every moment. Then, slowly, he walked to the desk and picked up a pen. He signed everything. When it was over, Marco and his men escorted Richard out of the clinic. Elena stood at the window and watched him go, watched the man who had controlled her life for so long climb into a car and disappear around a corner. She did not feel triumph. She did not feel satisfaction. She felt free. Dominic came to stand beside her. "Are you all right?" he asked. Elena turned to look at him. This man who had seen her at her lowest and had offered her a chance to rise. This man who had fought for her, protected her, believed in her. "I am better than all right," she said. "I am finally myself again." Dominic smiled, and Eleanor saw something in his eyes that made her heart skip. He took her hand. "Then let us figure out who that is," he said. "Together." 6 months later. The clinic had expanded. What had once been a small building on the south side was now a complex of 3 buildings, serving thousands of patients every month. Eleanor had become its director, overseeing a staff of 30 nurses and doctors who shared her commitment to helping those who had nowhere else to go. Her hair had grown longer, past her shoulders now, healthy and shining. She wore it down most days, a reminder of how far she had come. Dominic had changed too. The shadows in his eyes had not disappeared entirely, but they had softened. He spent more time at the clinic now, less time in the other parts of his world. He was slowly, carefully transitioning his businesses toward legitimacy. It was not easy. It was not fast. But he was trying. On a warm spring evening, Elena stood on the roof of the clinic, watching the sun set over Chicago. The sky was painted in shades of orange and pink, and the city glittered beneath it like a handful of scattered jewels. She heard footsteps behind her and smiled without turning. "I thought I might find you here," Dominic said. He came to stand beside her, close, enough that their shoulders touched. "It is beautiful," Elena said. "It is," Dominic agreed, "but that is not what I came to talk about." Elena turned to look at him. He was nervous, she realized. She had never seen him nervous before. "What is it?" she asked. Dominic took a deep breath. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Elena felt her heart stop. "I have thought about this for months," Dominic said. "I have written speeches and practiced words and planned the perfect moment. But standing here looking at you, I realize that none of that matters. What matters is this." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple and elegant, with a diamond that caught the fading light. "I love you, Elena. I love the woman you were before the world broke you. I love the woman you became while surviving. And I love the woman you are becoming now. I want to spend the rest of my life watching you grow. I want to wake up every morning knowing that you chose me. I want to build something beautiful with you, something that proves that even people like us can find our way to the light." He got down on one knee. "Elena Vasquez, will you marry me?" Elena looked at him, at this man who had seen her at her worst and believed in her best, at this man who was trying so hard to become worthy of her. She remembered the alley, the rain, the cardboard box that had been her only shelter. She remembered thinking that her life was over, that she had nothing left, that she would die, forgotten and alone. And then she remembered his hand reaching out to help her stand. "Yes," she said, "yes, I will marry you." Dominic's face broke into a smile so bright it rivaled the sunset. He slipped the ring onto her finger and stood, pulling her into his arms. They kissed as the sun disappeared below the horizon, as the city lights flickered to life, as the stars began to appear one by one in the darkening sky. And somewhere, Elena was sure, Maria Moretti was watching and smiling. The wedding was small and private. Just Elena and Dominic, Marco and Isabella, and a handful of people from the clinic. They held it in a garden on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by flowers and soft music, and the people who had become their family. Elena wore a simple white dress and carried a bouquet of wildflowers. Her hair was braided with tiny blossoms, and she had never felt more beautiful. Dominic wore a dark suit and the expression of a man who could not quite believe his luck. When The officiant asked if they would take each other as husband and wife. They both said yes without hesitation. And when they kissed, Eleanor felt something she had not felt in years. Hope. Pure, uncomplicated hope. That night, they danced under the stars. The music was soft, and Dominic held her close, and Eleanor rested her head against his chest and listened to his heartbeat. "I never thought I would have this," she said. "Neither did I," Dominic admitted. She looked up at him. "Do you think we deserve it?" He considered the question. Then he smiled. "I think we have earned the right to find out." They danced until the stars began to fade and the sky began to lighten with the promise of a new day. And when they finally went home, to the house that was now theirs, to the life they were building together, Elena realized something important. She had spent years carrying the weight of her past, the failures, the pain, the impossible hair that had become a symbol of everything she had lost. But she was not carrying any of it anymore. She was light, she was free, she was loved, and for the first time in her life she was exactly where she was supposed to be,